Join us on the Recovery Matters podcast, where we celebrate the power of resilience and explore multiple pathways to recovery.
Hey, Jesse, welcome to the Recovery Matters podcast. And what matters to you about recovery?
You know, statistically, those who actually that are in substance use disorder that actually get the help is a minimal statistic. And to have those who have made it out, and they kind of represent that minority of those who have longevity in recovery, and to attribute that as an education, I think is amazing. And to say, hey, there's some secret sauce in this, there's some juice in that, that we need to encapsulate and dose other people with, so that we can transform people, the CCAR.
Yeah.
So, to me, recovery is, it's a lifestyle, but it's also a privilege. So, you know, recovery to me is a privilege.
We both got into recovery for a reason. So what were you like growing up? What were you like?
Oh, geez.
Oh, geez.
Well, okay. So, so for me, my stage was set from the beginning. My mom came from Kiev, Ukraine.
Huh.
So I was a first generation American. My mom had me at 3 days after her 14th birthday.
What?
So very young, and that's wow. But
Wow.
my culture, my mom's culture, that wasn't atypical. And so, that I was raised by teenagers from the beginning, which meant no structure for the most part. Nobody telling me, when to go to bed, when to turn off the TV, that sort of thing. Which might sound kind of nice to some kids when I tell my story to the youth, but the other side of that is I didn't know when meals were going to come. I didn't know if I'd have clean clothes to wear. In fact, somewhere along the line, I picked up stealing as a learned behavior, and it was okay. It was acceptable in my family. Like, nobody questioned if I emptied my pockets out from candy from the store and say, "Hey, where'd you get that?" That was fine. It was an acceptable behavior. Things took a turn for the worse for me when I was 4 years old, because my dad was no longer in the picture, and I had no idea why he left. In fact, my mom had kind of led me to believe he had passed away, and that he was never coming back. And so I kind of, at an early age, I thought my dad had passed.
Mm-hmm.
I found out many years later that he, in fact, went to prison during that time, but was already very unstructured, kind of took a turn for the worse. So now I'm with my mom, who's around 18 years old, and she'd often leave me in the care of my uncle, who was a year younger. Again, he was also from Kiev, Ukraine. And my uncle had I didn't know it at the time, either never saw it or didn't know what I was dealing with, but he had a heroin addiction. And so what he would do is during some times where I believe now what he was doing was he was using, but to try to protect us or to give some isolation from us, he would lock my brother and I in a bedroom. And I can remember that still vividly to this day. He would take the vacuum cord and he would wrap it around one door handle, which is the bathroom across the hall from our doorway, and wrap the other. And at that tension line at 5 years old, I couldn't open that door. And so the thing is, with my mom being in school full-time, working full-time, she worked overnights. Sometimes I wouldn't see her for quite a while. And I'd be locked in my room for a day or two at a time. And so I was already used to fending for myself as a youth growing up with food and things like that. So really, I just learned to adapt, and I started stealing food and hiding it in my closet, so that when I would be locked in my room, which happened weekly, if not bi-weekly, I would have something to eat, not only for myself, but for my little brother. So I was taking a lot of responsibility for my little brother, who was just 14 months younger than me. I think they call it Irish twins. And so I would lock, when we get locked in there, I'd hide food in my closet so we'd have food to eat. And even at that age, even though I thought, there was some normalcy in that because I wasn't in school, I didn't have a point of reference. I didn't say to myself, hey, my life is messed up. I didn't have any thought like that. I just knew I had to adapt and survive. I did hate having to use the restroom in the corner of the room. And I taught my little brother to do the same. Even at that age, I hated that part of it. On one occasion, actually, I hit a hammer in my closet. So when I got locked in my room again, my apartment was on the first floor of an apartment window. I took that hammer, and I'm probably 5 years old. I smash out the window, and I take my little brother in his diaper. We escape off into the neighborhood for an adventure. We actually ended up staying the night it was an apartment complex at like near one of the neighboring apartment buildings, friend's house. And the next morning, when our friend's mom was asking, "Hey, does your mom know where you are? Are you guys okay?" I thought at the time that I should probably lie to her and say, "Yeah, my mom knows where we are. In fact, we got to go home now." Of course, we didn't want to go home, so I took my brother in his probably pretty dirty diaper at that time, and we ended up throwing rocks at windows, just breaking out windows in another nearby apartment window. The police came and actually brought us home, and when they got home, he knocks on the door, and a police officer answers, and it's my mom. I mean, the police officer knocks on the door, and it's my mom, and asks if these are your kids, and she says yes. We walk in, we kind of sit down, we're watching on the television, and that was it. Like, she didn't come and ask us where we'd been. Like I said, I don't really remember seeing it. I don't know if my mom was using at the time. In my experience, that probably indicates that she probably was.
How old were you then?
I was 5 years old.
And you remember this that well?
There were certain certain times in my life that really stand out to me. And this time does, because it was shortly after this experience.
Was this in Minnesota?
It was in Minnesota. That
in a city?
In the cities, Minneapolis.
Okay.
And so shortly after that, my brother and I ended up getting put up for adoption.
What?
And so there was that time, and I mean, I remember saying, not having a clue what was actually happening, but my mom crying and saying goodbye to my mom for the last time, not understanding that it was the last time. And so I was 6 years old, my brother a year younger. We got adopted to a really good family. Obviously, people that wanted to love on us. They had a heart to love kids that weren't their own. They were well-to-do. In fact, they were both attorneys, and they wanted to take on these cute boys that weren't theirs and give them everything they never had, which was great. So on one level, I had this huge stability. On the other level, I just lost my mom. And I even though my mom, maybe didn't take the best good care of us, I still loved her, and I really missed her. And I became very guarded right away, and I didn't trust the family dynamic. I already probably didn't trust the family dynamic that much.
Did she ever tell you what? Did she tell you why, or do you remember her your adopted parents telling you why?
Well, they didn't really tell me why, but my mom did leave me a letter.
Oh, okay.
That I didn't get to read until I was around 13 years old.
Is it?
And so, her reason was that, we're coming where she came from. This was the best opportunity for her to have her best life and for us to have our best life. And so she put us up for adoption. Growing up, I guess, with my adoptive parents, I was careful around home. I didn't want to disrupt things at home too much. My brother was kind of the opposite. I mean, he would flip out, and I would try to kind of keep him under wraps. But at school, I was completely rebellious. I started skipping school in third grade. In fact, I started, trying alcohol and nicotine at 11, age 11. And didn't stop since, and quickly, went into marijuana. Earlier before that, I'd said, I went through, drug programs at school that I was just going to say no. And I thought I would say no. And it never said no. But I was in sports and things, but by the time I got into high school, I had pretty much dropped out of all my sports. In fact, I started getting brought home by the police around 12 years old, and ended up having this light bulb moment in ninth grade because I was smoking weed almost every day. It's getting expensive, and I thought, hey, I'll just sell weed in school. I know everybody that smokes weed.
Are you ready to make a difference in the lives of others? If so, then you should consider becoming a recovery coach. Recovery coaches are trained to help people in recovery, seeking recovery, or struggling with addiction. They provide support, guidance, and resources to help people on their recovery journey. CCAR Training is the leading provider of recovery coach training programs. Our programs are designed to teach you the skills and knowledge, what we call the science, while giving you an understanding of your own art needed to be a successful recovery coach. We offer a variety of training options, most offered online. If you're interested in becoming a recovery coach or just learning more, I encourage you to visit our website or contact us today. We would be happy to answer any questions you have and help you get started on your journey to becoming a recovery coach. We hope you'll visit us at www.addictionrecoverytraining.org to learn more.
So I'm selling weed in school in 9th grade. And I meet a kid in the bathroom, and he pulls out a butterfly knife. He whips it out. He must have been practicing all night, like Jackie Chan or something. He whips it out, and he tells me to give up the weed. But I actually, always kind of prided myself on always outthinking, because of the way I grew up. I think it just was it was natural for me to outthink and try to be prepared. And so I reached in my pocket like I'm going to give this guy the weed, and I pull out a pistol instead. And he runs out of the bathroom. And I can hear him yelling down the hallway, he's got a gun. And first thought's man, this guy's bogus. He tried to rob me for drugs with a knife, and he's snitching on me. Second thought was, I can't get caught with this, right? So I bail school, hide the drugs and guns at a friend's house, and I go home. 4 a.m. the next morning, the police actually raid my adoptive family's home. They had no part in that. Like I said, they were well-to-do, good people, really doing the best they could to manage some kids that were completely out of control. And by the way, I'm teaching everything I'm doing. I'm teaching my little brother to do with me. I mean, he's my sidekick. So long story short is, that they didn't find the guns, and they didn't find the gun. They didn't find the drugs. But I did have live ammunition. I had bullets I forgot about in my dresser drawer. They found that. So I was still in a lot of trouble, and ended up kind of through that process. My brother and I ended up getting surrendered back over to social services. And so this reinforced this idea that I just could not trust anybody. I really dove even deeper into the street life, because they put me in group homes, oftentimes a different group home than my brother. And we'd run away to be in the streets together. And there we'd, sell drugs to survive. And I actually had some good POs along the way. I had a PO that knew I was going to run from every group home and said, what can I do to help you? And I was like, well, I want to go to school, but I can't because I'll get picked up on my warrants. And she said, if you go to school, I will sign the guardianship and enroll you in school. And I promise you won't get picked up for your warrants at school. And I did that. So I actually did go to school quite a bit, in and out of different group homes, picked up for different adjudications all the time, in and out of juvie. And so that was kind of my life until I was about 18. And then I actually at 18 got kicked out of the state. I was getting released from a juvenile lockup facility after serving 6 months. And I was 18. I was about to have my first child with a woman that was 9 years older than me.
Okay.
And she had moved out of state to Louisiana, and I had a choice. The state gave me a choice. They said, you can either go on extended juvenile jurisdiction, or you can be kicked out of this band for the state for 1 year, 365 days. And if you come back, we'll put you on probation as an adult. So, of course, I just said, I'm out of here. And I left, stayed gone probably just less than a year, and ended up coming back right at about the year mark. Didn't work out with the lady that I had gotten pregnant after 2 months. I got her pregnant right before my 6 months and going to that juvie stay. So I came back and I hit the ground running, went back to all my drug dealing, drug using friends in Minnesota, and thought that if I elevate myself in the drug world, that's how I'll survive. That's how I'll protect myself. That's the lifestyle I want to live. And so I did that, and I had about an 8-year run, selling drugs up to a higher level, using it increasingly trying, things I had said I'd never do. I mean, like we talked about just say no. Well, I mean, I said yes to all sorts of things. But even though when I started using weed and alcohol, I said, well, I used to laugh at people, even though I started selling hard drugs, I used to laugh and say, I'd never do the hard drugs, right? Well, then when I did start doing the hard drugs, I said, well, I'd never do needles. And I eventually blew that. every time I stepped over my own compromises, I started thinking about the compromises I was making less and less, where I was just making them as if they were natural. I started then getting investigated, started going to prison. I spent over 10 years in prison since 2008. 4 different times I was incarcerated. Every time I thought I'd go to a treatment center called Teen Challenge to try to get out of it, and didn't go. Kept going back to treatment. I'd get out. I'd be sober. Every intention I'd gotten fit in prison, and every intention to at least not go back to prison. But within the matter of months, the cycle that it took me from teenager to mid-20s to use every drug in a couple months. It was during my last incarceration. I'm going to wrap up here towards the end of, I guess, the last few years. It's during my last incarceration. I was doing executing a 30 months sentence, 44 months to serve 30. And I get a phone call that my younger brother, the one that was adopted together with me, my biological brother, was in a motorcycle crash. And, I have 3 kids at this point. I have 2 other children, and I wish that they had been enough for me to change my life. But to be honest, like, I wasn't a good father, even worse father, probably outside of prison than I ever was in, to be honest. Like, the things I put before my family and my kids was apparent when I was out. When I was in, there was some semblance of trying to care and maybe send a card. But so my brother's in a motorcycle wreck in 2018. He slides under a guardrail. He's under the influence of opiates and meth. Slides under a guardrail going over 100 miles an hour in a crotch rocket. About cut his body in half. His right shoulder all the way down to his right hip. Nearly severed his arm. For me at the time, actually, I stepped out onto the patio. Wasn't really, the lifestyle I was living wasn't really, I wouldn't say a man of faith or prayer or anything like that. But they were saying they were going to amputate his arm because it was that severely severed. And I stepped out into the prison yard, and I just begged God for mercy. I just asked him to save his arm, and something happened in that moment too, where I felt like this flooding over me of kind of a peace. And one of my friends, I'm sure they just thought I was in shock because I went and told him, I said, his arm's going to be all right. He kind of patted me on the back. But that was when I started deciding I needed to make some changes. That was the moment, and his arm was saved, by the way. So he's now in a wheelchair, and he has a traumatic brain injury, and I'm in prison, and I'm knowing that if I get out and do the same things I've always done, I'm going to end up back in prison. And so I started looking into some options for when I get out, and I had a brochure for the program I now work for, Teen Challenge, the one I had never made it through the front doors of, and I found out that my incarceration time doesn't count as sobriety time. And so I could still have funding, county funding, to go to treatment full time when I got out. And so I went, the day I got out was June 3rd, 2020. And I went to a campus in Minneapolis, right in the heart of Minneapolis. And if you remember what's going on at that time, we had the George Floyd incident happening. And so the day I got out of prison, I'm literally getting a transport from a Department of Corrections, and I'm rolling through the streets. There's military buildings on fire, quite chaotic. But if the way I had grown up and the way I had lived my life really wasn't a surprise to me. What was a surprise to me is that when I came into the doors of this facility, this treatment facility, there were people that worked there that really wanted to just love on me. And a lot of those people had been where I'd been. Mm-hmm. They were called recovery coaches here at Teen Challenge, but they were peers in recovery. Some of them I had actually done prison time with. They were the ones that had disappeared, and maybe I heard became a preacher or something. I don't know what happened to them. They're just gone. But some of them were there, and I just thought that, hey, if these guys can do it, and I'm looking at them and I'm seeing that they've got a glow on them, a shine on them, that there's hope for me. I could probably do something like this too. So I hit the ground running. Like I said, I had 30 months sober. Didn't count as sobriety time coming in, but I hit the ground running. I dug in and started addressing some of the hurts and harms in my own life, some of the things that I just talked to you about pretty openly. Really broke those down with a mental health therapist. I had an LADC, a chaplain, people to help me work through different areas of my life and my wellness with those categories. The kid's mom that I had talked to in 5-6 years, closer to 6, just decided, hey, because I want to be this man of integrity and walk on with my life, but if I don't at least try to be there for my kids, how does that mesh? How does that man of integrity mesh with never trying to be there for my kids? So I picked up the phone, really just thinking it was just going to be an easy phone call because she's not going to want to talk to me. No way. I haven't talked to her in almost 6 years, or my kids. Some of the other 10 earlier part of the 10 bids that have been a little different, but not this last time. After I went to prison 3 times on her, she said that was it. So she had a friend that went through this same program and it turned their life around. And she knew that there was probably at least a chance for me that if I actually did this program, that things could change. And so she started visiting. I got to the 6-month mark in my treatment program. I got a family therapist because we have kids in common. So I got to start addressing some of not only my own hurts and harms, but what I had left my family with and abandoned there. At the end of my 13 months in this long-term treatment program, learned a ton of new coping skills, just went back into some of the basic things that I left off when I was a kid, like sports and athletics and studies, things that I was interested in. And, after all of that 13 months, I decided to ask my kid's mom to marry me. She said yes. And so after I had graduated, I got married. And so I'm reinstated with my youngest 2 kids. My oldest still lives in Louisiana. And quite frankly, she has some addiction and substance use issues in her life. But she did recognize us about 6 months ago. We're on the phone, and she said, "Well, Dad, I don't know that I'm ready to change, but she said one thing I can't deny is that your change is real." And so there's something there, and that door's open if she wants to talk about it. But I got involved with my faith community right away when I left. It's just been an incredible journey. That's why I say recovery is a privilege.
Yeah.
To me, and it's bigger than me because none of this stuff could I have ever done on my own. It's not about me. It's really just about bringing what you got and really like changing your paradigm of thinking. Some of the things that the way I used to see things, I kind of had to just open myself up where I was previously so closed off and say, let me try what you're saying because what I've been doing hasn't been working. And so as a community now with a lot of community around me, collectively, we're so much better off. We're so much stronger. And I really love the community that I've gotten myself involved with, but at large, the recovery community and the people that, like myself, and a lot of other people that I work with, a lot of people that I work for that are in recovery, just phenomenal people with exceptional amount of talent that, substance is almost destroyed, but there's something there that's so special. They're change makers, they're difference makers, and they almost got buried, but now they're just moving mountains, changing things in the community. It's just great to be a part of that recovery movement and what's happening.
How do you take care of your recovery today? How will you take care of it?
Today I'm a person of routine with flexibility, meaning that things can change. It's not an absolute, but I keep a structure and I keep it accountability. Probably most importantly, I keep accountability. For me, like the things that I run to my support ahead of the problem, right? So I staying connected. Now I've had a chance to talk to other people, and so part of it is giving back, but with boundaries, right? I need self-care. I need to spend some time with my family. I need to spend time with myself and exercising, and then I need to spend time in my community engagements, and then a space of that which is giving back and contributing back. And it makes it really easy that my job is working for Teen Challenge, for the giving back and staying connected and staying reminded. But for me, it's that I'm a very structured and routine person, and then I keep my accountability. And so I'm always looking for ways that I can continue to kind of do the work, and then personal growth. So I'm going to be going back to college here, probably the next semester.
How cool. Thanks for sharing. Appreciate you very much.
Thank you.